welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today, joined by Nick. He is the product or head of product at StudioSpace. StudioSpace is all about a marketplace for connecting agencies to corporates in terms of marketing agencies predominantly, from what I understand. But we'll dig a little bit into Nick's background and history, and he's been all around consulting and exiting to Deloitte as part of a company originally and some startup space. And I think we'll dig predominantly into product today, because product is, as I sort of say, sometimes product is not. If product is your strategy, then that's not correct. So product is not your strategy, but it is a pivotal piece to how we execute and deliver value. So it's more of how do we action from that perspective. So, and building a marketplace can be quite challenging in terms of connecting dynamics and having multiple people to sell to and connect to. So we'll dig into a little bit today. Nick, thank you for joining us and joining us on the DevReady podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, mate. Let's dig into your background, because it's quite fascinating where you've been and what you've done in the past, and then we'll jump into StudioSpace a little bit down the track. But talk to me about how you got into product originally and where it all started from.
Yeah, thanks. I started my career off in consulting, so kind of working for one of the bigger technology consultancies, and then got some experience there and moved to a specialist agency called Market Gravity. So we were at the time kind of purely focused on innovation consulting, is what we called it. Also called kind of proposition design or corporate entrepreneurship. But that's also where I met the kind of founders of StudioSpace. But at the time, this was kind of a time where design thinking and customer centricity was kind of really taking off, especially within big corporates. So, bringing in customers into the discovery, design, and delivery process. This was something quite new to corporates at the time, and they'd seen successes in Silicon Valley, new startups coming up, and everyone was kind of preaching this new way of working. So that was kind of our goal with Market Gravity, to help big corporates create new revenue streams, growth streams by designing new products, services, and also developing kind of innovation capabilities. Through what we call
fascinating space in terms of we've worked with corporates in our past, and not so many these days because I just find it challenging. How did you find that? Because innovation, some really do it well, but that's the minority from what I've seen. How have you found that?
It was definitely challenging. I mean, I think our inherent belief at the time was, businesses can do good, and there's, a lot of great talent and capability within businesses. It just needs to be harnessed in the right way. And it often comes down to kind of not only the tools, different tools, but also kind of a mindset. And
it's a big mindset shift.
It's a massive mindset.
How you're operating it. Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge.
It was, And a lot of it came down to isolating a team, having a dedicated, what we call kind of a squad within what we called a mission, which was like a set of sprints, and kind of taking them out of the day-to-day a little bit and having our own room and, getting down to prototypes and getting stuff out on paper and, getting out of laptops into, talking to customers. And it was challenging. We definitely launched some successful stuff. We got some products and services out into the market. But the challenge was, there's so many things that you just can't account for within a big corporate. So from budgets to competing interests, different stakeholders having different interests. While we had some amazing, proven products, they often didn't make it out to market. So that's kind of where, started thinking, is there something more out there in terms of actually, developing and launching stuff? That's.
Oh, it can be it's an interesting space because you've got so much resource in the world of corporate. It's just, how do we encourage people to take the risk and to shift the mindset? That's what I found is quite a bit of a challenge in the corporate space.
Yeah, that is spot on. Like the risk appetite is, not as high as it is in startups. So actually, we were trying to prove that these products or propositions, had enough appetite from customers, but it was, the amount that was asked for in terms of proof would just be, impossible to gain unless you actually, launch something and get some feedback from real customers. But obviously, there's brand risk if you're a company and you launch something that's untested. So it ended up being very hard to do, but yeah, definitely some successes.
I'm sure you would have learnt a lot. What's some of the key takeaways that you took from that working with corporates in the space of innovation?
Yeah, there's a few. I think one was making things real, so really taking the voice off the customer. And we did initial insights, so research, whether it be at qual or quant, and then we prototyped, got things out on paper and visualized things and created videos, a lot of visual and communication assets to take people through the journey. Like storytelling was, and I've taken that through to what I do today. Like storytelling is such an essential part of everything we do. Kind of bringing things to life really helps create that buy-in. Be it just showing a video of a customer, talking about some insight and their pain points versus getting a prototype out on I don't know, Figma or other tools, Envision at the time, for example, and showing them stuff and getting feedback. It's invaluable.
And you need that stakeholder buy-in in a corporate, right? So there's multiple layers of that. So if you can tell a great story, paint a good picture, potentially you can get some cut through. There's no guarantees in that, but yeah, potentially you can get some cut through.
Yeah, that was massive. And then I think the other one is then collaboration. So like, as you say, you need to get buy-in from multiple areas of the business to really, get any traction. So we held a lot of workshops, which were, one, workshops are useful because you get everyone in the room and you can cut through some of the silos, but also it's just getting kind of momentum and people aligned on the story. That really helps kind of gain traction. And again, something that I think I still use a lot because wherever you go, you need to get buy-in and get people aligned.
It doesn't matter where you are, small, medium, large, buy-in's required, otherwise nothing really happens. You need to
100%.
be able to excite people or get people on a journey. So that's where storytelling comes in. In terms of some of those assets, I think that's quite fascinating to dig into. What are some of the assets that you would use for the storytelling piece? Is it decks? Is it just, you mentioned client feedback videos? Like, how do you generate buy-in? And what's some of the critical things that you see?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, as consultants, we use PowerPoint a lot, but I think at this particular agency consultancy, we try to stay away from it where possible and really use stuff that brings things to life. So, in the discovery phase, it would be like actually hearing from customers. And often we got clients to do some of the interviews themselves so that they'd hear it firsthand. And then into design, it's like where we can visualizing things. So if it's a product, it's easy because you can visualize features and some of the UX, some of the experience. If it's a service, sometimes you have to kind of talk a little bit more about the customer experience and kind of, visualize stages of the journey. So we'd often kind of either through sketches or videos try and visualize what the future customer experience could look like. And then, videos were a great asset, actually. We did a lot of videos because that really helps tie together like the whole story end to end. And, can you go from hearing from the customer and their pain points to here is our proposition and some of the features and some of the benefits to here we tested with other customers and this is what they said about the product and therefore this is, what we're considering for the roadmap. So anything visual really, really helped.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. A lot of people use a deck. A good video intro could also be valuable after you just discuss that. So, okay, guys, people to look through. When you were in corporate for a while, and then you made that decision that I want to get into something that maybe moves a bit faster, that I can probably influence a little bit more. What was that first step for you?
Yeah, so something I did mention. So market gravity at the end of my journey there. Actually through the middle, we were kind of growing massively. We had sort of projects and kind of offices all over the world. At the time, me and a few colleagues were actually going to set up an office in Singapore because we'd just done some projects in Asia. So had a project in China and Hong Kong and Singapore. But at that time, we ended up getting acquired by Deloitte. So that took us, kind of pivoted our approach to setting up an office to actually going to Sydney. So that became an offer, and here I am 6 years later, still in Sydney, so clearly enjoying it. We sort of spent a couple of years, 2.5 years or so at Deloitte Digital, where I did But after a while, I kind of missed that sort of culture of small business and, kind of a little bit scrappy, getting your hands dirty. And I wasn't quite, that's kind of why I originally moved away from big consulting. I wasn't quite, the culture of a big consulting wasn't quite aligned with what I wanted. So I looked at kind of, what was out there. And I think I mentioned earlier, I had always in my back of my head, I'd thought about startups and specifically product management and actually, launching products in the startup environment, which can be very different to a corporate environment because, you're starting from scratch rather than inheriting a load of tech debt and architecture.
Very true. Yeah, you don't have to figure out how you're going to embed something into this massive ecosystem and different roadblocks that you don't have in the world of startup at all.
Definitely, and it becomes a competitive advantage versus at a corporate. It's kind of working out how you can fit into the existing structure, and it's often just navigating challenges rather than starting from an opportunity. So it's a very different starting point. So I ended up meeting the founders at KeyPay, which is a payroll software company, and joined them. Had some amazing year or two there, helping them develop a new product there, kind of targeted a slightly different target user within their company, but they eventually got acquired by Employment Hero. I was a unicorn.
They are obviously a big company that most people would know these days.
They're pretty big. But at that point, I kind of decided I wanted to, again, not work for a larger company and start a new challenge. And it kind of worked out really well because at that time, talking to Robin, one of the co-founders of StudioSpace, and also, who was the team at Market Gravity, about this potential new idea that they had. That's kind of when the conversation with the StudioSpace team began and the whole journey started. And I can talk a little bit about that, but that's we've a couple of pivots since that time. So that was 3 years ago.
Yeah. So you started at StudioSpace from the ground up. This was right at the beginning, right?
Right at the beginning,
Yeah, let's go on that journey. So what brought you into StudioSpace? What was the fascination? What was that excitement that leveraged you? Yes, this is something I want to be a part of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we'd all been part of this kind of journey of, small agency, but also a lot of people had been in big either big corporate sort of what we call client side, or also big consultancies or agencies. So everyone had seen sort of the two sides of the fence. But I guess what we had really seen, from that journey is, and what we really wanted to start with, StudioSpace was really championing the belief in kind of independent specialist agencies. So, we really believe they have the best people, the best team, really talented, but there's kind of really big challenges for them, working with big corporate clients. And on the other side, the big corporate clients really want to work with these new up and coming agencies, but, face challenges in doing so. The current industry in terms of like large consultancies and large holding companies and kind of advertising, etc., is quite stale and homogenous. That's not changed much, from days of Mad Men and kind of traditional consulting. It's all quite similar. So we really wanted to help, champion those small agencies, independent agencies, and help them, break into that. And then, for clients, tons of challenges around procurement, onboarding those kind of smaller suppliers who might not often meet the kind of criteria of, what they deem as to be able to be a supplier, kind of like turnover or, size, etc. But then also there's a kind of risk for individual buyers. You don't take any risks in hiring McKinsey. Everyone always says that. If you need to, it's kind of no one's going to blame you if you hire them. Versus if you were to take on a small independent agency, it might be perceived as a little bit more risky. So we kind of wanted to, I guess, challenge that norm, and that was our kind of our mission. And it's kind of where at the beginning our business was actually called Studio Works, and that had a slightly different proposition than it is now.
So it's always evolving, right? Let's dig into some of those challenges. I find it interesting in terms of a corporate onboarding a smaller agency. what's some of the challenges that they see? You mentioned procurement, going through the rigors around that. How does StudioSpace solve for those challenges in terms of now? What can you do to support people that are or businesses that are a bit smaller getting to some corporate clients?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about how we initially wanted to solve the problem and then kind of how we
Yeah,
pivoted a
okay.
little bit. Because at
Yeah,
the beginning,
soon as a learning.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, yeah.
at the beginning, our proposition was we wanted to, because we'd been in, sort of innovation consultant, which is often the kind of a lot of the spearhead of the project. So you kind of develop a new product and then you bring a load of, different capabilities to help build that. So from delivery to, brand and marketing. And that's kind of why, Deloitte Digital acquired us, because, you often, there's what they call pull through. So you bring on a load of different service areas from the business to support that new product or service. So initially, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have a small team who would specialize in that and bring in loads of these great specialist agencies to support. And we sort of started building a SaaS platform around that to help the agencies manage their finance and operations. Again, champion the specialist independent agencies, but we quickly realized actually this isn't scalable, that it still relies on us to do a lot of the kind of consulting element of it and, actually getting agencies to do that and matchmaking them with clients. We quickly realized that was a kind of a better opportunity. So that's kind of where the actual StudioSpace proposition came up. And yeah, you mentioned sort of challenges. Yeah, lots of challenges with procurement. I mean, what we quickly realized is, first of all, these smaller agencies really struggle to get onboarded and be taken seriously by procurement. Procurement, the reason they often go for like a big, let's say Deloitte Digital or WPP, is because they onboard one supplier and then they have tons of capabilities to offer.
Yeah, lots of capability. Yeah,
So it's just much easier. They don't have to worry. They don't there's someone at the consultancy or agency that or holding company that manages everything for them. So that's the kind of security they wanted. So I guess with our proposition, it's a single supply contract. So the client signs up with one what we call like a master services agreement. That they have the master services agreement with us, and then all of our agencies have an MSA with us as well. So essentially,
so you cut through. Understood.
so
Okay.
the agencies contract through us. So once the client can access our platform and marketplace, they at the moment can see sort of over 350 agencies, and in a heartbeat, as soon as they've got an MSA with us, they can work with them instantly. So it's cutting through a little bit of that. The kind of usually slow kind of process, but also
It's a fascinating disruptor here. So you've basically gone ahead and produced what a big consulting group can do, but not owning the resources. Yeah, nice little disruption there.
yeah. It works well, and part of it is the ease of the contracts, and we take some of that headache away. Underneath that is obviously a lot in terms of kind of risk and compliance. So we onboard all of our agencies and have a framework for onboarding, which we kind of worked through with some procurement experts a while ago. And then also for each engagement, we kind of asked the agencies to complete some forms just to give we talked a little about enterprise. There's a lot of requirements for enterprise and things to show these big corporates that we're not just a scrappy startup. We have some processes and practices in place to make sure that every agency that we onboard is high quality and really does meet a sort of minimum threshold and criteria. And then the other one is for agencies it's a great prospect because they get to work with these big corporates, which they don't normally do, and
That they couldn't actually access before. Yeah, it's a fascinating one. You obviously bear a lot of the risk though because you're holding the contract, right? So
yes, so that's a really
the
good
biggest component of it. That's the business holds the risk.
It does, and we hold some of the risk that we guarantee, I guess, the quality of our agencies, and if anything goes wrong, I guess that's what the clients also like we're a bit of a safety net. So if anything goes wrong, we have a network of these agencies. We will, at no cost, if anything goes wrong, replace one of those agencies with another agency if that ever needs to happen. But fingers crossed it won't happen, and it hasn't happened so far. So we've been quite fortunate in that sense.
That's testament to the process up front, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's enough rigor in there, you should be able to get a good outcome at the other end. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that's what we've, I can take you through a little bit of our journey in a second, but, that's why a lot of what we did and what we still do is still quite manual, and it does involve, intervention from our sales team to make sure that upfront, agreement is really clear, and that we have, the brief, the scope, everything needs to be crystal clear so that, delivery runs smoothly. That at the beginning, we very much learnt through doing everything manually and having a very rough MVP that we brought to market. Now we've learned enough where we're starting to automate and create workflows around that. We needed to learn firsthand before building anything.
So at the beginning, Studio Works it was. How did you go about, and the intent was always to build a marketplace and connect in some capacity, right? What was the first initial, because a lot of people go and just build tech and invest a hell of a lot of money and build something from scratch. How did you approach it?
Yeah, good question. So we were very much, I think, took our learnings from, that sort of corporate entrepreneurship and rapid prototyping, really starting with a minimum viable. So we created an MVP and, span up something with no code, low code tools, didn't really build much. We had something that we built, which was really rough around the kind of that initial SaaS platform that we discussed. So that was something that we built, but as we pivoted to this sort of marketplace model, we spun that up really quickly, just using we used kind of Webflow as our, website as well as marketplace, so our kind of public-facing marketplace, and then used kind of a combination of Zapier and Airtable and other tools to manage our kind of agency network.
Sticky tape a few things together and just prove a concept, right?
Very much so. And we definitely, we used some, advocates at the beginning. So we had a few agencies that we'd worked with or had close relationships with, and also a few clients, and we really focused around them and got them on board. And that was the challenge at the beginning, the kind of what they call the cold start problem. It's one of a book by Andrew Chen. It's around what do you start with first, right? Do you start with supply or demand? It's a bit of a chicken egg question. So we very much focused on the supply first. We needed some agencies on the marketplace to be able to show clients. So we did that, got a few, we were spread across the UK and Australia. So we got, a minimum set across some key kind of categories. The challenge is also we span a lot of different capabilities. So we're digital, marketing, and creative. So the whole spectrum of agencies really, from building new products to UX to SEO, brand advertising campaigns. So we really had to focus on kind of one or two of those verticals. And then did that sort of, started with a few clients who had an interest in that space, a few agencies who were specialists in that space, and built it up from there, and just kind of hacked together solutions, as you said, with sticky tape, and had something enough for agencies to be able to showcase what they were about, and clients to kind of browse the marketplace and then pick a couple of agencies they wanted to work with. So it was very, very rough and ready, but that was kind of the first year really prioritizing learnings over and getting some kind of traction in terms of revenue over having a fully fledged scalable product. It was very much just every day was different, and managing things from product in that day was operations, data, not just products, customer service. And I was obviously the first person doing all of that. So it was every day was different.
It's managing a bit of a juggling act, right? So I think we can either go in too fast into product and building, and then we end up unwinding and having to build new things that evolve, and the expense is significant. So if you can hold off the initial build and test some stuff and generate some revenue. That obviously improves validation, and then if you want to raise some funds, it makes it a lot easier, or it's enough for you to go a bit further faster and understand how we might invest.
Yeah.
At what point did you make the decision to start building some of your own product outside of that low code, no code environment? What was a
Yeah.
pivotal turning point for you?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to remember what the timings were, but yeah, year one was definitely sort of MVP, product market fit. As you said, there was, some successes in that, a lot of frustrations because, we had to do a lot of it manually, but, that's just part of the journey. Everyone was aware of that. Year two was really, I think, it was kind of building their foundation. So we started taking the learnings and kind of building a custom platform. So again, sort of, eating our own dog food, we used then a different agency who was more suited to that. Started, with the foundations around onboarding, creating a team. Then started, with the marketplace, kind of taking learnings of what we had from the original marketplace and implementing those for the new marketplace. And yeah, a lot of it was, those are the foundational kind of features, I guess. But then there was a lot around process, around how do we get the information from the customers, specifically from the agencies, and optimize it in a way
How do you
to
validate them? Because that's what you're doing, really. You're not just putting anyone up there.
yeah,
There's quite
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How right now, is that mostly still a lot of man hours required, or what have you done to automate part of that, or how does that look?
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning, that sort of year two was definitely like, let's just set some processes for our team to do it manually.
Got it.
You create some sort of user guides and training materials to guide them. But now I think in year sort of three, we've really started like scaling up and developing also more client facing features. So obviously, as I said, the sort of agency marketplace was, while it's also obviously client facing, it was to help, showcase our agencies. But yeah, really kind of moved into that space and sort of focused now, I think year three, very much on kind of, growth and, taking feedback from internal and external users and, helping create scale. Because we quickly, I think in the end of year two, sort of when we, developed those, we kind of recreated the MVP platform in something, more scalable. We quickly kind of, worked out that the sort of demand, we were getting a lot more demand, and our team wasn't able to kind of, pick up with it because...
That's a good problem to have, though, right?
It is.
If the demand's coming in, we solve for that, which is rather than solving for how do I find my first customer? It's a great problem to have.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, we again, like we had to do so much manual stuff, and it wasn't ideal, and we probably had to increase, like the amount of time spent on each project. But obviously, we want to dial that back so that we can increase, the revenue further by getting our sales team to actually spend time on sales rather than sort of account management or customer service.
In my experience being in the world of software product, the pivotal thing to deliver a good outcome is clarity. That's the number one thing I'm striving for. How do you drive that? Because the reality is a lot of people that put out briefs, content, go to market for a quote or to get people engaged. There's a diversity of what comes through. There can be that full spec, this is what we need. There can be a paper napkin, we're trying to achieve X. That can be somewhat the bare bones of what actually makes or break a project, who the stakeholder is actually driving the project. That's what I found across the journey. And then if you've got the agency that can find the gaps, that understands that, can really drive and work with stakeholders to close that, ensure clarity is one of the pivotal things. But that's few and far between. It's not every agency that lives and works that way. How do you solve for that problem? Because I think it's one of the biggest issues in the entire space, and when we're going to engage or get some help or some support in the project.
Yeah, really interesting challenge. I mean, I think the beginning, the way we solved it is purely by our sales team being really involved in the upfront kind of scoping of projects. Yes. A lot of our team have been on agency side, so they know, having to deliver projects and scope them up front, what it takes to do that. But I think from a product sense, we kind of started very much with first principles and kind of taking it, well, looking at the old process, which we've all experienced, but also thinking, about a new process and, a new way of working and then, a new, a new model really, and kind of, taking it to the bare bones, thinking, well, what do we need to create a really good brief? We wanted it to be fairly concise because sometimes it can be overly complex. So we really kind of, with everything started, well, what's the minimum that we need? And we did the same with our kind of taxonomy, looking at how do you categorize different agencies and their skills to, how do you create a brief? How did you create a statement of work? And, again, what's the optimal process to get there in, the least amount of time, but also with the best kind of outcome to set you up for the project. So, I think we spent a lot of time, first of all, learning from that first year, but then also doing design and, iteration with internal team and, getting feedback from clients and agencies as well. I guess some of the challenges we had with getting feedback from clients and agencies is because it's a new model, it is sometimes hard to get the feedback that actually drives value because it's so different. And I guess that's always the challenge with doing something new, right? It's you have to take the customer feedback with a pinch of salt because it's so new that, sometimes they're not quite used to it and might ask for something completely different or, give you. So it was very much looking internally as well as externally, balancing the two.
One of the biggest challenges in startups, especially if you're cutting something new, you can't rely on that customer feedback all the time. You have to think ahead of them in terms of what might be the problems that we're working into or solving to in the future. Internally, what's some strategy you have around that? Because yes, you might get feedback from customer, we need XXX, but the reality is they're probably not looking at it from a very focused on this is the problem rather than the holistic view. What are some things you do internally to actually drive out that holistic strategy?
Yeah, good question. I think we just always take kind of a mixture of data points. So, we'll do some workshops internally, first of all, to kind of understand the problem, with the people our sales team who face these challenges and issues day to day. Then I think we'll often do talk to customers in terms of clients and agencies up front, but we find there's a bit more value in talking to them when we have some idea of, what the solution looks like or some kind of designs in Figma that we can prototype and test with them.
Okay.
Yeah, because
showing is sometimes a lot easier than having a conversation, isn't it? It's a picture paints 1,000 words, as they say. Showing something Figma or a bit of a prototype does really make a big difference.
Yeah, something to react to, especially when it's new. You can't describe it in words. It's really hard to do. And then it's just taking different data points, and we also use tools like Hotjar to analyze current how people interact with the platform, and if we're developing a new feature, it's how do we take some of the feedback of how they're using the current platform to inform our.
I love Hotjar. You find some fascinating outliers as to how people use things. And you pick
Oh my god, yeah, I know.
It's quite interesting.
It's not how you plan, but what are they doing there?
Yeah, it's an odd one sometimes. It's like, okay.
I think it can be really humbling, actually. It just, you think and plan so much, and you're like, this is obviously how people are going to use it, and like how other people do it, and then it's nothing like it that actually happens. You have to. Yeah, there's so much. Like I've learned after every sprint, have another sprint in there to just iterate and pivot and feedback, and because it's never quite as you anticipate.
No, it isn't. But we've got a product in pharmacy. It's a SaaS product, and I distinctly recall, it's all about marketing and product and putting tickets on a shelf and communicating in store. I recall that there's an ability, so you got a product data sync and you can go and add a product and then you can actually print out a ticket for it. The one user, complete outlier, was clicking add one product, they were going to the next step, they were coming back and then adding another product, going to the next step, coming back, thinking, oh my goodness. It's quite fascinating, some of the stuff you see. It's like a complete outlier, but it's quite interesting what Hotjar can tell you. Yeah, it's a bit of fun to actually look at some of that stuff.
It's all part of the journey.
Oh, it is. In terms of where you're going at StudioSpace, what's the goal? What's the vision today? Because it will evolve. And what are you trying to stem for? Because I find the model quite fascinating. What you're working on. Where you're at? What's the goal? Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I mean, yeah, we've kind of built out our core functionality in terms of like, this marketplace of, quality vetted agencies, the sort of matching. So I guess from finding the agency to submitting a brief and sort of all the stuff in between, there's quite a bit to our process as well in terms of like matching and meetings and facilitating that. And then what we currently have is built out quite recently over the last 3 months is a kind of contracting platform which helps create the draft statement of work, and it's a collaborative tool where the agency and client sort of feedback on one agreed statement of work. So that, as you say, the clarity of scope is really important.
Really important. And contracting is another issue, right? So back and forth on contracting is also a challenge.
And
engaging. Yeah.
And what agencies typically do is either send out a kind of Google Doc or something, or it's emailing back and forth. That's the kind of old process. Whereas that's first of all not fit for enterprise. Second of all, it's just not an efficient way of working.
Yeah, it isn't.
Whereas there's plenty of other tools out there. So we wanted to build something to enable that. I guess future. So now that we've built that, and we have a whole set of functionality around delivery as well, which helps creating invoices. Tracking the project, making sure it's complete at the end. I guess future we have quite a bit. This is really targeting our kind of core buyers within the client. So obviously there's for us different users within a client. An enterprise is or corporate is a big company with multiple different users. The buyer of a project, be it a head of marketing or head of business unit, is the person who's buying the project is a core user, but the second user who's also core is procurement team. So what we're developing next in terms of functionality is to help that procurement team, first of all, gain more insights. They already have the benefits of accessing all of the agencies through StudioSpace, and having a bit more clarity on who are we working with. We currently have dashboards that help them get a picture of like, where am I spending my money? Who within my team is spending money where, not within their team, but within their organization. Better MI basically for them to understand, really where's their spend going across different capabilities. That's kind of our focus, to bring that kind of stuff we had sort of outside of the platform. We're bringing all that into the platform and really developing kind of the next level of enterprise functionality for clients to be able to have StudioSpace is really their go-to, for kind of digital marketing and advertising or creative spend. At the moment, we're kind of used, for different projects across different buyers, and we have a couple of clients who use it in an enterprise fashion. But we really want to grow that. The feedback we've gotten from those enterprise, clients has been amazing. It's, you can help me have a consistent process. Clarity and insight around who I'm spending and where I'm spending. So we really want to, double down on that and help those, procurement teams further.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a lot of value there, clearly. As we go back to what we were talking about, the clarity piece, you help them drive that, get a better brief out, communicate that right, connect them to the right people that can deliver that outcome.
Yeah.
De-risks it from that perspective for them. At scale, it's going to de-risk it clearly as you get more runs on the board and grow this out. How many agencies do you currently have on the platform?
It's funny, we actually did a bit of stat searching the other day. We've got over 350. I think it's on 370 odd, but we've got about 70 that have not published their profile live, so they're sort of on the back burner. So
just coming in, probably
quite a few.
What is this thing?
But we've got about 700, 800 who applied. So that's definitely not the challenge on our side. For us, it's now kind of curating. Well, we want to get the right agencies on to, also match the demand in terms of briefs.
I think it's easier to get the agencies, right? Everyone's looking for new work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a sales channel. Like, how do I drive more leads?
Yeah.
That's the simple side. The corporate side. You mentioned offline that it's a lot of your effort is sales in how do we encourage enterprise to come onto the platform, and that's pretty manual. How do you drive that? Because sometimes in business or in SaaS and in product, people think we put a platform out there and people will come.
Yeah,
But the reality is not that. So how are you working on that to close the gap to get the demand side coming up from that enterprise level as a
yeah,
supply of work, really? Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, good question. So, yeah, different ways, I guess. One is we do still do a fair bit amount manually. You know, a lot of our founders and sales team have a lot of experience in the space, so can help. While the agencies have expertise in delivery, we sort of help bridge the gap between an initial brief and finding an agency. So a lot of our matching is manual. We know our agencies really well and can match that against the brief. So that's like I guess a core kind of selling point at the moment. A lot of that we want to automate and digitize. So, and AI is a big space we're looking into next around, three core areas really. Like one is how can we create agency profiles to, automate some of that. So like, do some scraping and, be able to, pre-generate, also using Gen AI, some of the content. Second one is like, how can we improve brief writing? So again, we're experimenting with ChatGPT at the moment to help with some prompts around those different capability areas to spit out a brief with minimal input from the client. And that will really, I think, help kind of overcome that friction. And then the last one is matching. So we've already partnered with a couple of universities and kind of doing some research around, agencies that have matched and kind of developing an algorithm around that basically. So we're kind of still in the early stages, but yeah, to answer your question, like a lot of manual stuff to trigger sales and trigger more demand, some automation in the future and some smarts around that in the future. Then also a whole load of marketing events and bringing together agencies and clients and bringing up really interesting conversations and using some of the data that we have on where clients spend to trigger some interesting conversations.
Nick, been a pleasure. We've gone over. I'll probably let you run from here, but thank you for
Yeah,
joining us on the DevReady podcast, really coming on and sharing the story of your journey and what you're doing now at StudioSpace. I find it a fascinating model and can be very disruptive if you get it right, for sure. So it'll be interesting to follow your journey and see how that progresses from here. So thanks for coming on and sharing your story on the DevReady podcast.
thanks Andrew, thanks for having me.